Elena's hand shook as she stood outside the bedroom door. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. She had only worked in the big mansion for 3 days, but she already knew that silence meant danger. And right now, the silence was too thick, too heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. Elena pushed open the white door. So shiny she could see her own worried face in it. The room inside looked like a princess castle from a storybook. Pink curtains hung from tall windows. A bed with lace covers sat in the middle, surrounded by more toys than Elena had ever seen in her whole life. Dolls with perfect hair. Stuffed animals with bright button eyes. Everything looked brand new, like nobody had ever touched them. But in the corner, curled up on the floor like a tiny broken bird, was Sophie. The 7-year-old girl was breathing in short, painful gasps. Her chest moved up and down too fast. Her small fingers clutched a gray stuffed lamb so tight that her knuckles looked white. Her blonde hair stuck to her forehead with sweat, and her lips had a scary blue color around the edges. Sophie! Elena rushed across the room, her cleaning supplies clattering to the floor. She knelt down beside the little girl, her heart pounding like a drum. Sophie's eyes opened slowly. They were the color of the sky on a cloudy day, pale blue and tired. So tired. When she tried to speak, only a wheeze came out, followed by a cough that sounded like a hurt. Shoo, baby girl, Elena whispered, even though she'd been told never call the family's daughter anything but Miss Sophie. Right now, she didn't care about rules. I'm here. I'm right here with you. Elena had 6 younger brothers and sisters back home. She knew what sick looked like, and Sophie wasn't just sick. Sophie was struggling to breathe. We need to sit you up, okay? Elena said gently. She helped Sophie lean against the wall, supporting her tiny shoulders. Now, we're going to breathe together. Slow and steady. Watch me. Elena breathed in through her nose, counted 3 in her head. Then she breathed out through her mouth, making her lips into a small circle like she was blowing out a candle. Sophie tried to copy her, but another cough shook her whole body. It's okay, Elena soothed. She grabbed a pillow from the bed and put behind Sophie's back. Then she started rubbing gentle circles on the little girl's shoulders. You're doing great. Let's try again. Nice and slow. This time, Sophie managed a shaky breath that didn't turn into a cough. Then another. Her eyes locked onto Elena's face like she was holding onto a lifeline. That's my brave girl, Elena said. She brushed Sophie's damp hair away from her face. Where's your medicine, honey? Do you have medicine for this? Sophie nodded weakly and pointed to a dresser across the room. Elena jumped up and found an inhaler tucked behind a jewelry box, hidden like someone didn't want to see it. Her jaw tightened with anger. How could anyone hide medicine from a sick child? She brought it back and helped Sophie use it. After a few puffs, Sophie's breathing got a little easier. Not good, but better than before. Why were you on the floor? Elena asked softly, sitting down next to Sophie and pulling her close. Why didn't you call for help? Sophie's voice came out small and cracked. Mama says, I shouldn't make noise. She says, sick people are weak, and weak is embarrassing. Elena's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. She hugged Sophie tighter, feeling the little girl's fragile body shake against her own. Listen to me, Elena said firmly, tilting Sophie's chin up so their eyes met. You are not weak. You are not embarrassing. You are sick, and that's not your fault. And you know what? It's okay to need help. Everybody needs help sometimes. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really, Elena promised. And I'm going to help you. Whenever you need me, I'll be right here. For the first time since Elena had met her, Sophie smiled. It was a tiny, fragile smile, but it was real. They sat together on the floor for a long time. Elena hummed a quiet song her own mama used to sing to her when she was scared. Sophie's breathing got slower and calmer. She even closed her eyes for a few minutes, the stuffed lamb still clutched in her arms. That's when the door opened. The click of high heels on the marble floor sounded like gunshots in the quiet room. Elena's whole body went stiff. She knew that sound. She'd been warned about that sound. Mrs. Victoria Ashford stepped into the room, like a queen entering her throne room. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Elena made in a year. Pearls wrapped around her neck, catching the afternoon light from a window. Her dark hair was pulled back, so tight it made her face look sharp and angry. Her lipstick was perfect. Her nails were perfect. Everything about her screamed money and control. But her eyes, cold and blue like ice chips, looked at Elena and Sophie with something that wasn't love. It was more like disappointment. "What?" Victoria said in a voice smooth as silk and sharp as a knife. "Is going on here?" Elena stood up slowly, keeping herself between Victoria and Sophie. Her legs felt shaky, but she lifted her chin. "Sophie was having trouble breathing, ma'am. I was helping her." Victoria's gaze swept over the scene. The inhaler on the floor, the pillow, Elena's arm still protectively near Sophie, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. "I see." Victoria walked further into the room, her heels clicking with each step. "Sophie, stand up. You're behaving like a baby." Sophie struggled to her feet, wobbling. Elena reached out to steady her, but Victoria's sharp voice stopped her. "Don't touch her. She needs to learn to stand on her own." "But, ma'am, she's fine." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You're new here, Elena, so let me explain how things work in this house. We do not coddle weakness. We do not make scenes. And we certainly do not sprawl on floors like helpless creatures. Sophie has a condition, yes, but she must learn discipline. The world will not stop for her simply because she feels unwell." Elena couldn't believe what she was hearing. This was Sophie's mother, the person who was supposed to protect her, love her, keep her safe. And she was talking about a 7-year-old girl with a serious illness, like she was a soldier who needed to toughen up. "With respect, ma'am," Elena said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. Sophie couldn't breathe. She needed help. She needs. "What Sophie needs," Victoria interrupted, her voice dropping to something dangerous and cold, "is not for you to decide. You clean. You serve. You follow instructions. You do not parent my child. Is that understood?" The air in the room felt frozen. Sophie looked at the floor, her shoulders hunched. Elena's hands curled into fists at her sides. Before Elena could answer, another voice filled the room. "No, Victoria. It's not understood at all." Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway was a tall man with kind eyes and messy brown hair. He wore a suit, but his tie was loose and his jacket hung over his arm like he'd had a long day. His face was tired, but when he looked at Sophie, his whole expression softened with love. Mr. Michael Ashford had come home. Michael's footsteps were soft as he walked into the room, but his presence filled every corner. He moved straight to Sophie, dropping his jacket on a chair, without even looking at it. "Daddy." Sophie's voice was weak, but filled with relief. He knelt down beside her, his big hands gentle as he touched her forehead. His face changed when he felt how hot she was. Worry lines appeared around his eyes. "How long has she been like this?" Michael asked, looking up at Elena. "I found her on the floor about 20 minutes ago, sir. She couldn't breathe right. I gave her the inhaler and helped her calm down." Michael nodded slowly, his jaw tight. Then he looked at his wife. "Victoria, why wasn't I called? Why didn't anyone tell me Sophie was having an episode?" Victoria crossed her arms, her pearls catching the light. "It's just her usual dramatics, Michael. She needs to learn." "Learn." Michael's voice rose, something Elena hadn't expected. He was always so quiet, so polite in the few times she'd seen him. But now anger flashed in his eyes. "She's 7 years old with a respiratory condition. There's nothing to learn except how to stay alive and healthy." "You're being emotional," Victoria said coolly. "The doctors said she needs to build resilience. Babying her makes it worse. The doctor said she needs her medication, rest, and to avoid stress." Michael stood up, and suddenly he seemed taller. They never said to let her suffer alone on the floor. Sophie started coughing again, a rattling sound that made everyone freeze. Michael immediately turned back to his daughter, rubbing her back in slow circles. Elena moved closer too, ready to help. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she watched them. "You're both spoiling her. This is exactly what I'm talking about." She coughs, and everyone comes running. How will she ever be strong? By having parents who love her. Michael's voice cracked with emotion. By knowing she's safe. By not being afraid to breathe in her own home. The words hung in the air like thunder. Victoria's face went red, then white. For a moment, Elena thought she might yell back, but instead, she straightened her dress, lifted her chin, and walked toward the door. "Fine," she said, her voice like ice. "Coddle her. See what kind of person she becomes. But don't come crying to me when the world breaks her, because she never learned to be tough." The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a slam. The room felt different without her in it. Lighter, like someone had opened a window and let fresh air in. Michael let out a long breath and looked at Elena. His eyes were tired but grateful. "Thank you for helping her, for being here." "Of course, sir," Elena said quietly. She needed help. "Please call me Michael." He managed a small smile. "And I mean it. Thank you. I know Victoria can be difficult." Elena didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. Michael turned his attention back to Sophie. "All right, princess. Let's get you into bed properly. You need rest." Together, Michael and Elena helped Sophie into her bed. They tucked the covers around her, making sure she had enough pillows to keep her sitting up a little. It helped with the breathing. Sophie held her stuffed lamb close, her eyes already drooping with exhaustion. "Will you stay?" Sophie whispered, looking at Elena. Elena glanced at Michael, unsure. She was just a maid. She wasn't supposed to spend time with the family like this. But Michael nodded. "If Elena doesn't mind, I think that would be wonderful." "I don't mind at all," Elena said, pulling a chair close to bed. "I'll stay as long as you need me, sweetheart." Sophie smiled, her eyes closing. Within minutes, her breathing evened out into sleep, but it still sounded rough, like wind whistling through broken boards. Michael stood by the window, staring out at the manicured lawn and the fountain that sparkled in the evening light. The mansion grounds looked like a painting, perfect and beautiful and completely fake. "Her mother wasn't always like this," Michael said quietly, more to himself than to Elena. "When Sophie was born, Victoria was so happy. She held her for hours, wouldn't let anyone else touch her. But then Sophie got sick. The first time she stopped breathing, we rushed her to the hospital. The doctors said she had a chronic respiratory condition, that she'd need medicine and monitoring for the rest of her life." He paused, his hands gripping the windowsill. Victoria couldn't handle it. She saw it as a failure. Her perfect daughter wasn't perfect anymore. And instead of adapting, instead of accepting it, she decided Sophie needed to be fixed, made strong, as if loving her wasn't enough. Elena's heart ached. She'd seen parents like this before, people who couldn't accept when life didn't match their plans. But hearing it from Michael, seeing the pain in his face, made it real in a new way. "Sophie is perfect," Elena said softly, "just the way she is." Michael turned and looked at her, really looked at her. "Yes, she is, and I'm done pretending otherwise to keep the peace." The rest of the evening passed quietly. Michael ordered dinner brought up to Sophie's room. Soup and bread, soft things that wouldn't hurt her throat. Elena ate with them, which felt strange but also right. They talked in whispers while Sophie slept, careful not to wake her. But as night fell and darkness pressed against the windows, Sophie's breathing got worse again. Elena heard it first. She'd been dozing in the chair, but the change in sound jolted her awake. Sophie's chest was rising and falling too fast, each breath accompanied by a wheeze that sounded like a tiny whistle. "Michael," Elena said urgently. He was awake instantly, moving to the bed. Sophie's eyes were closed, but her face was scrunched up in pain even in sleep. Her forehead burned with fever when Elena touched it. "We need to cool her down," Elena said, "and she needs her medicine again." Michael nodded, already reaching for the inhaler. But when Sophie breathed it in, it didn't seem to help as much this time. The wheezing continued. Her lips started turning that scary blue color again. Fear clutched at Elena's chest. "Michael, I think we might need to call a doctor." "I'm calling an ambulance," Michael said, pulling out his phone. No. The voice came from the doorway. Victoria stood there in a silk nightgown, her hair down for once, but her face was just as hard as before. You will not call an ambulance. Do you know what the neighbors will think? What people will say? Michael stared at his wife like he'd never seen her before. I don't care what people say. Our daughter can't breathe. She's had episodes before. She'll be fine. You're panicking over nothing. This isn't nothing. Michael's voice rose to a shout. Sophie stirred, whimpering. He immediately lowered his voice, but the anger stayed. Look at her, Victoria. Really look at her. She's in pain. She's sick. And you care more about what the neighbors think than whether she lives or dies. That's not fair. It's completely fair. Michael moved toward Victoria, his whole body shaking. I have tried to be patient. I've tried to understand. I've made excuses for you. But I'm done. I'm done choosing your pride over our daughter's life. Victoria's face crumbled for just a second. Elena saw something flash in her eyes. Was it guilt? Fear? But then the mask came back, hard and cold. If you call that ambulance, Victoria said quietly, everyone will know. The whole neighborhood. Her school. Your business partners. Everyone will know that Sophie Ashford is defective. The word hung in the air like poison. Michael's face went white, then red, then something beyond anger, something like disgust. Get out, he said, his voice deadly calm. What? Get out of this room. Now, before I say something I can't take back. For the first time since Elena had met her, Victoria looked uncertain. She stood in the doorway, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Then, without another word, she turned and left. Michael pulled out his phone and dialed. Yes, I need an ambulance. My daughter is having difficulty breathing. She has a diagnosed respiratory condition, and she's not responding to her inhaler. Elena held Sophie's hand while Michael gave the address. The little girl's eyes opened, confused and scared. It's okay, baby, Elena whispered. Your daddy's getting help. Real help. You're going to be okay. Promise? Sophie's voice was so small. Elena looked at Michael. He nodded firmly, his eyes full of determination and love. I promise, Elena said. Your daddy and I promise. The ambulance came with flashing lights and kind paramedics who moved quickly but gently. They put an oxygen mask on Sophie's face and lifted her onto a stretcher. Michael held her hand the whole time, telling her she was brave, that he loved her, that everything would be okay. As they carried Sophie out, Elena followed. She didn't ask permission. She just knew she needed to be there. Victoria stood at the top of the stairs, watching them go. Her face was impossible to read, but she didn't try to stop them. In the ambulance, Sophie held tight to Elena's hand on one side and Michael's on the other. The oxygen mask covered half her face, but her eyes stayed open, locked on the two people who had chosen to protect her. And for the first time in days, Elena saw something new in those pale blue eyes. Hope. Morning light streamed to the hospital window, painting everything in shades of gold and hope. Elena blinked awake, her neck stiff from sleeping in the uncomfortable chair beside Sophie's bed. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she saw the machines, heard the steady beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor, and remembered everything. Sophie was still asleep, but she looked different, better. The oxygen tube in her nose whispered quietly, helping her breathe. Her cheeks had color again, real color, not the scary blue from last night. Her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm that sounded like music to Elena's ears. Michael sat on the other side of the bed, his head resting on his arms, fast asleep. His hair stuck up in every direction. His expensive suit was wrinkled. He had a coffee stain on his shirt. He looked nothing like the polished millionaire who lived in that perfect mansion. He looked like a father. A real father who'd stayed up all night worrying about his little girl. Elena smiled softly. Then she noticed Sophie's eyes were open, watching her. Suat hart, Elena whispered. How do you feel? Sophie thought about it, her small face serious. Better. My chest doesn't hurt so much anymore. That's because the doctors gave you really good medicine. And this machine is helping you breathe easier. Are you still here? Sophie asked, her voice full of wonder. You stayed all night? Of course I stayed. I promised, didn't I? Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. Nobody ever stays. Elena's heart broke and mended at the same time. She reached over and squeezed Sophie's hand. Well, I'm not nobody, and I'm not going anywhere. The movement woke Michael. He sat up quickly, immediately checking on Sophie. When he saw she was awake and smiling, his whole face transformed. He looked 10 years younger. Princess. He stood up and kissed her forehead. You scared me last night. Sorry, Daddy. Don't be sorry. Just focus on getting better. He adjusted her blanket, tucking it around her like she was the most precious treasure in the world, which Elena thought she was. A doctor came in then, a kind woman with gray hair and warm brown eyes. She checked Sophie's charts, listened to her breathing, and asked her questions. Then she turned to Michael with a serious expression. Mr. Ashford, your daughter is stable now, but I need to be honest with you. Last night was very dangerous. If you waited even 30 minutes longer to bring her in. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Michael's face went pale. What happens now? Sophie needs consistent treatment, daily medications, regular checkups, and a nebulizer home for emergency situations. She also needs to avoid stress and ensure she gets plenty of rest. With proper care, she can live a completely normal life. But without it, again, the doctor's silence said everything. She'll have everything she needs, Michael said firmly. Cost doesn't matter. Her health is all that matters. The doctor smiled. Good. I'll write up the treatment plan. She can go home this afternoon, but she'll need someone monitoring her closely for the next few days. After the doctor left, Michael turned to Elena. I know this isn't part of your job description, but would you be willing to help? To stay with Sophie, at least until we get into a routine with her treatment? Elena didn't even hesitate. Yes, absolutely yes. I'll pay you extra, of course. It's not about money, Elena interrupted gently. I care about her. I want to help. Michael's eyes got shiny with unshed tears. Thank you. That means more than you know. They brought Sophie home that afternoon. The mansion looked the same on the outside. Gleaming white walls, perfect gardens. That ridiculous fountain that probably cost more than most people's houses. But something felt different the moment they stepped inside. Victoria was waiting in the foyer. She stood perfectly still, her hands clasped in front of her. She'd done her hair and makeup flawlessly. But Elena could see dark circles under her eyes that the makeup couldn't quite hide. She looked tired. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit sorry. How is she? Victoria asked quietly. Stable, Michael said, carrying Sophie up the stairs. No thanks to you. Victoria flinched like he'd slapped her, but she didn't argue. She just watched them go, something complicated flickering across her perfect face. Elena followed Michael upstairs, but she glanced back once. Victoria stood alone in that huge, empty foyer, looking smaller than Elena had ever seen her. Over the next few days, the mansion changed. Michael set up Sophie's room with all the equipment the doctor recommended. A nebulizer sat on her nightstand, along with charts to track her medication. He installed an air purifier that hummed quietly, cleaning the air she breathed. He even bought a baby monitor, so they could hear if she needed help during the night. But the biggest changes weren't in the equipment. They were in the feeling of the place. Sophie laughed now, real laughs that echoed through the hallways. She and Elena played games, read books, and did breathing exercises that felt more like fun than medicine. Michael came home early every single day, abandoning his important meetings to have dinner with his daughter. The mansion filled with sound, music, conversation, laughter. All the things that had been missing before. Even the strict rules relaxed. Sophie was allowed to eat popsicles in bed when her throat hurt. She could stay up late watching movies with her dad on Friday nights. She could be a kid, messy and imperfect, and absolutely wonderful. Victoria struggled with the changes. Elena saw her standing in doorways sometimes, watching Sophie and Michael play, an expression of longing on her face. She didn't join in, but she didn't criticize anymore either. She was quiet, thinking, maybe even learning. One evening, about a week after the hospital visit, Elena was helping Sophie with her nebulizer treatment when Victoria appeared in the doorway. "May I come in?" she asked softly. Sophie looked at her father, uncertain. Michael nodded. Victoria walked slowly to the bed and sat down carefully, like she was approaching a wild animal that might run away. She looked at Sophie for a long moment, really looked at her. "I owe you an apology," Victoria said, her voice trembling. "Actually, I owe you many apologies. I was wrong. About everything." Sophie's eyes went wide. Elena had never heard Victoria apologize for anything. "I was so worried about what other people thought that I forgot what actually mattered." Victoria's hands twisted in her lap. "I forgot that you matter, that your health matters, that your happiness matters. I was a terrible mother." "Nanga." Sophie's voice was small. "No, let me finish." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, she didn't try to hide them. "When I heard that ambulance last night, when I realized that you could..." She couldn't finish. A sob broke through her perfect composure. "I thought I was making you strong, but I was just making you afraid. And lonely. And I'm so sorry." Sophie looked at her mother, really looked at her, and saw something she'd never seen before. She saw her mother's fear, her pain, her regret. "It's okay, Mama," Sophie said quietly. "I forgive you." Victoria broke down completely then, pulling Sophie into a gentle hug and crying into her hair. Michael put a hand on his wife's shoulder. Elena quietly slipped out of the room, giving the family privacy. But she didn't go far. She stood in the hallway, her own eyes wet with tears, and smiled. Sometimes people needed to break before they could heal. Maybe Victoria would never be warm and soft. Maybe she'd always be a little bit rigid, a little bit focused on appearances. But she was trying, and try was a start. The weeks turned into months. Sophie grew stronger, healthier, more confident. She started a new school, one that understood her condition and supported her needs. She made friends. She joined a gentle art class. She lived. Elena became more than a maid. She was family. She ate dinner with them, joined their movie nights, and even took a day off each week. Michael insisted on it. He gave her a raise without her asking, saying it was long overdue. Victoria slowly, carefully, built a new relationship with her daughter. She learned to ask how Sophie felt instead of telling her to be strong. She attended doctor's appointments and asked questions. She even volunteered at Sophie's school, helping in the art room. It wasn't perfect. They still had hard days. Victoria still sometimes caught herself about to say something harsh and had to stop, breathe, and choose kindness instead. But she was trying. Every single day, she was trying. One evening, as summer turned to fall, Elena sat on the mansion's back porch watching Sophie play in the garden. The little girl ran between the flowers, her stuffed lamb tucked under one arm, laughing at absolutely nothing, just happy to be alive. Michael sat down beside Elena, handing her a cup of tea. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For saving my daughter's life. For showing me what really matters. For making this house feel like a home." Elena smiled. Sophie saved herself. "She's the strongest person I know." Maybe, but she had help. Michael looked out at his daughter, love shining in his eyes. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is accept help, ask for it, admit we can't do everything alone. "Yeah," Elena agreed. "Sometimes it is." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Sophie play. The mansion rose behind them, no longer a cold showplace, but a real home where a little girl could breathe freely, laugh loudly, and be herself completely, where love mattered more than appearances, where family meant choosing to care every single day, where a maid named Elena had become a guardian angel, and a sick little girl had taught everyone what true strength really meant. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Sophie ran up the porch. Her cheeks were flushed with happiness, her breathing easy and clear. "Elena, Daddy, come see what I found." They got up and followed her into the garden, ready for whatever adventure she discovered. Because that's what family did. They showed up. They stayed. They loved each other, imperfections and all. And in that beautiful, messy moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Did this story touch your heart? If Elena's courage and Sophie's strength inspired you, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. And subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about love, courage, and the strength we find in the most unexpected places. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. What did you think of Elena's choice? Let us know in the comments below.